Today's topic, I'm going to be discussing converting your traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. Go over what is a traditional IRA versus Roth IRA, why somebody may want to do the conversion, what are the benefits of converting your traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, and then more importantly, what are some of the negatives, what are some of the mistakes that individuals make, and how that could really hurt them and move them further away from what they were trying to accomplish for their retirement income needs or just their retirement planning needs in general. So to first understand this concept, think of a traditional IRA as a bucket, or think of a Roth IRA as a bucket. And the way on how those two buckets grow is by a combination of contributions that the person is making into the plan and then the rate of return that is coming back based on the different investments that they chose within this bucket. With the traditional IRA, what's happening is anytime somebody makes a contribution to this, they're going to receive a tax deduction into this account off of the monies that they're placing in there. Everything's going to grow pre-tax or tax deferred. And then when it comes time to start pulling monies out of this and taking withdrawals from this bucket, it's going to be fully taxable. So if you ever heard the terminology pre-tax, what that means is you're getting some tax advantages currently. Whenever somebody's making that contribution, it's growing tax deferred, meaning it's pre-tax and not taxed yet, so that whenever they start taking withdrawals from this account, after age 59 and a half, all those monies are going to be fully taxable. So as an example, if somebody accumulated an IRA account and it's sitting at $1 million and they decide, okay, I'm going to take out $50,000 this year because they hit their retirement age and they want to start trying to accomplish some of their expenses for that month, for that year, this $50,000 is going to be fully taxed. So this is going to show as if they made this $50,000 as ordinary income for that year, for that tax year that they're pulling the dollars out. Pretty self-explanatory. With a Roth IRA, the way and how that taxation works is essentially the opposite. So what's happening is an individual, anytime they're making contributions into a Roth IRA account, those monies are not going to be tax deductible. Because they're not getting that tax deduction now, the monies will grow within this account tax-free. After age 59, when they decide to start pulling monies from this, these dollars would come out tax-free as well. So due to the current economic environment, individuals are terrified on what tax rates could potentially grow to by the time that they hit retirement age. The old adage was, okay, if I'm going to be making less money in retirement, claiming less money in retirement, I should be getting taxed less. That's not necessarily the truth. If somebody is making less dollars but tax rates increase for those lower tax brackets, that could ultimately result in you paying more taxes later on in life, when you need the taxes to be the smallest amount possible. So this is why individuals are doing conversions from their traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. They're taking their monies from a pre-tax qualified retirement account and they're converting them over into a tax-free account, which sounds great. You're taking taxable monies and you're converting them to tax-free monies. The downside to that is whenever you do that conversion, all of those dollars that you've converted for that taxable year, you're going to have to pay the taxes on. That's going to act as ordinary income for that year. So as an example, if somebody has $500,000 that's sitting in their traditional IRA account, and they say, okay, I want to take advantage of the conversion opportunity. I want to roll this money over into a Roth IRA account, all of it. Well, starting after that next year, the traditional IRA account balance would be $0. The Roth IRA account balance would be starting at $500,000. But what happened from a taxation standpoint? Because you did the conversion, this individual now showed as if they made an extra $500,000 this year on top of what their ordinary income was for them, their spouse, whatever that case might be, however they file their taxes. So this could have jolted them into the next bracket, the next tax bracket or the highest tax bracket, and then on top of it, they're paying full taxes on those dollars that they did the conversion. So they have to make sure, that's going to be a large tax liability when they do that conversion. So a really quick tip could be, okay, trying to splice this out, trying to understand and create some sort of strategy to say, if I have $500,000 in this account, I eventually want all of it to go into a Roth, but maybe I'll go and splice out $50,000 per year of conversions for the next 10 years, or I want to splice out $100,000 per year for the next 5 years to make sure that by the time my retirement age comes due, I'm going to be able to pull these monies out and they're all going to be sitting in tax-free accounts, Roth accounts. The other thing regarding Roth IRA accounts that does not pertain to conversions is income limitations. So typically, if an individual makes too much money, and there's different thresholds per year, but if an individual and their spouse make too much money based on how they file, they cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. But that does not mean that they cannot do a conversion into a Roth IRA. So like as an example, if let's say, an individual and their spouse were making $350,000 in a given year, and they had, $500,000 IRA bucket that's also sitting there, well, because they made too much money for that year, they can't actually make a contribution into a Roth IRA account, but they can do a conversion. Think of that conversion as a rollover. So they could say, okay, out of this $500,000, I want to convert an extra $100,000 this year so that they could ultimately create a Roth account and have that Roth account funded by the conversion dollars. So it's a way to stay underneath the cusp to make sure that you could take qualified monies, pre-tax monies, and turn it into tax-free monies. So the 30,000-foot view of it is just saying, throughout retirement, it's better to have monies that it doesn't matter what the tax rates are, what the tax brackets are. If your dollars are going to have 0% tax to it because it's sitting in a Roth, that could allow you to plan better from a retirement income standpoint, from a legacy standpoint, from a growth standpoint. There's a whole multitude of different things you could do. And by at least understanding that your tax rate will be 0% when you're trying to pull from that account, it could make things less stressful throughout your retirement. Now, one of the ways on how individuals accumulate dollars into a traditional IRA account is typically when they have old employer-sponsored retirement plans, such as a 401k or a 403b or a thrift savings plan account, or a 457 plan. There's a whole multitude of 401a as an example. There's a whole multitude of different things on how somebody could go and accumulate dollars through their employer plan. They're making contributions into the plan, they're getting a match into that plan, they're leveraging the investment options of that plan. But when they stop working for that employer, it allows an individual to take those monies and roll it over into an IRA, a traditional IRA. So they're not taking full receipt of those dollars, they're not taking it in the form of a withdrawal, but they're rolling it over into a traditional IRA. So this is where when an individual, let's say that they're nearing their mid-50s, their early 60s, but they're saying, okay, I want to retire by the time I'm at least age 65 as an example, they might have at age 60, they might have an extra $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, possibly $1 million that's sitting in a traditional IRA account that now you could start leveraging conversion strategies because they're not quite at the retirement age yet. So you could start planning on, okay, how can I do these conversion dollars and make sure that my retirement's going to be a lot easier by that age 65 onward, but by age 65 until date of death. So everything, think of retirement planning and financial planning as a whole as just a large puzzle piece. And you have to put together these different pieces and making sure that they fit correctly pertaining to each specific goal. So there's typically 3 things that every individual needs to figure out before they're retired, or if they're currently retired, how to stay retired forever. The number 1 thing is income. The number 2 thing is emergency. And the number 3 thing is growth. With income, when an individual stops working, they need to make sure that their cash flow, their retirement cash flow, is going to be greater than or equal to what their expenses are. So this means if they're no longer working, they're no longer able to bring in that paycheck, how could they leverage their existing assets? How could they leverage Social Security income? How could they leverage pension income to make sure that it's going to be greater than or equal to their expenses? If there's a gap there, that's when they have to leverage their remaining assets to make sure to close that gap. Whatever they don't use as an income-related strategy, so they're using the smallest amount of dollars only as much as necessary to accomplish step 1, then they can move on to step 2 to make sure they have their proper emergency needs met. And then the ultimate goal is to try to leave as much money left over in the growth bucket in that step 3 as possible. And there's a whole multitude of different things you could do to grow these monies, whether that be super risky investments, whether that be super conservative investments or fixed accounts, fixed index accounts, safe accumulation accounts. There's a whole slew of different things, but ultimately to get to that finish line is making sure that you have a safety net of saying, I have more than enough income that will accomplish my expenses each year. I have more than enough money in my emergency needs in case of an oh my gosh moment that occurs to cover that specific need each year. And I have all this remaining dollars in my growth related strategy to make sure that now those are versing each other. And that's just basically the cherry on top. That's the ancillary dollars. So if we look at this sort of three-thing scenario, but we look at that off of a converting a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, why does it make so much sense? Or how could this be very advantageous for a position? And really where individuals fail in retirement is the income planning stage. So the two main areas of income comes from Social Security income and pension income. Unfortunately, majority of individuals are not offered a pension plan. So that relies on Social Security income as a main income source. So typically it goes off of whatever the assets that the individual accumulated. When they hit that retirement year, they have to make sure that they're creating a proper income strategy from those assets and Social Security income. Well, if you have monies that you're pulling from and they're sitting in traditional IRA accounts, that's going to increase the amount of taxes that you have to pay in retirement. Because as an example, if you take $100,000 out of your IRA account as a withdrawal in retirement, that's going to show that you made $100,000 that year. So let's say somebody's sitting in a 30% tax bracket and they took out $100,000, with all other things being equal, they'd be able to walk away with $70,000 of it. They're not netting that full $100,000 because 30% of it, $30,000 had to go to taxes. If let's say, and one of the other aspects of this traditional IRA is it increases the amount of provisional income calculation that could impact the taxation of Social Security income. So if someone's pulling monies from a traditional IRA, that could also hurt the amount of net benefits that you're getting from Social Security income. With a Roth IRA, if let's say somebody's pulling out $90,000 of a Roth IRA, well, a Roth IRA has 0% tax. On top of it, a Roth IRA is not incorporated in provisional income. So therefore, you'll be able to net the most amount of dollars from your Social Security income, be able to net the most amount of dollars from your Roth IRA income, and potentially have no tax on your Social Security monies. It really depends upon, obviously, each situation, but this is another main reason why individuals do this. So whenever we're looking at the step one, by doing the conversions and having the money sitting in Roth IRA accounts, you might still have that gap between what your cash flows are in retirement and what your expenses are. But if that gap is minimal, or if we could leverage Roth IRA monies to close up that gap, that could benefit you in two aspects. One for Social Security income, and then the other for whatever the income strategy is leveraged for that Roth IRA as a type of lifetime income. Because if you're receiving lifetime income from the Roth IRA, that's going to be income tax-free for the rest of your life. It's coming in like clockwork every month, every year to the day that you pass away, or you and your spouse pass away, however you set that up. If we stay within that three-thing scenario concept, we understand the first step is income, the second step is emergency, and then the third step is growth. Many times individuals leverage this growth strategy because they're saying, hey, whatever's left over, I might want to pull some money off of this for a vacation need or for, to purchase a new car, purchase, my golf course membership, whatever that case might be, travel to go see the grandkids. Individuals typically like to leave a portion of these dollars for some sort of legacy plan. So if you're leaving dollars in an IRA account, you say, okay, this is going to be left over to my beneficiaries, be mindful what a traditional IRA has is something known as required minimum distributions. A Roth IRA does not have required minimum distributions. So it used to be age 70 and a half. It was recently changed within the last 2 years that RMD's required minimum distribution started at age 72. What this means is, like I mentioned before, somebody's accumulating dollars in a traditional IRA account. They can't start touching this money until age 59 and a half. And then the IRS forces them to start pulling out portions of these dollars at age 72. So maybe at 1 year it's going to be, let's say 2% at age 72, and then the next year could be 3.2%. The next year could be 4%. The next year could be 5%. So every year that they're getting older, the government is forcing them to start taking out withdrawals from their traditional IRA account. What happens when they take out withdrawals from that account? It's going to increase the amount of taxation because as they take withdrawals, those monies are fully taxable. As they take withdrawals, that will also increase the amount of potential Social Security taxation because it's increasing the provisional income. So everything has a trickle-down effect. If you're trying to leave your traditional IRA as a death benefit and you're trying to maximize what that death benefit is, well, the RMDs could hurt that, because obviously if you're pulling monies from that traditional IRA and then you're going to have to pay taxes on those dollars, it's going to leave less of account balance that's left over to your beneficiaries. On top of it, when your beneficiaries receive this traditional IRA, it's going to be fully taxable to them. If you're trying to leave those as a type of legacy and you're just trying to grow it and you don't want those RMDs to not only affect your provisional income, place you potentially in a higher tax bracket, it will also provide you a higher death benefit. So it could maximize the amount of death benefit, because whenever somebody passes away and they leave their monies to beneficiaries in the form of a Roth IRA, those monies are going to the beneficiaries tax-free. So those are some of the reasons why individuals do the conversions from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. If you're unfamiliarized with the system, or you want to try to create some sort of plan and speak with an advisor regarding a strategy, feel free to give our 1-800 number a call. It's 1-800-566-1002. You'd speak to one of the assistants and they'll set you up with an appointment with an advisor. You could reference this video, explain your situation, and see if we could help you out, getting you from point A, where you are right now, to point B, and then from point B until ultimately what you see as your ideal retirement, all the way to the date of death, successfully. As morbid as that might sound, this is, if we're looking at it from a 30,000-foot view, this is what we want to make sure that we're structured in, that you're at least giving yourself the least amount of stress in retirement. You're giving yourself all these little mathematical advantages to produce more income, more net benefits, as opposed to just going with the status quo, just saying, I'm just going to stay in a traditional IRA, or I'm just going to stay in my 401k and hope that everything works out. Hoping is not an actual plan. Hoping is just a portfolio, just trying to hope that your account's going to grow. So that's obviously, by being organized, it puts you in a much better situation. Now, some of the problems that occur when somebody's doing these conversions is they'll do a lump sum conversion. And I mentioned that briefly in the beginning. I said, if somebody has a larger account and they try to go and do the conversion, do a full conversion, that could increase the amount of ordinary income or taxable income that they have for that year. And that could jolt them into a higher bracket. So therefore, it could make them receive less of net benefits, as opposed to taking a structured approach and trying to splice it based on however many years they ideally want to retire. You could basically take that and divide it by the amount of years, or you could set it up so that you're staying underneath the cusp within your current tax bracket. So like as an example, if you go and you're making X amount of dollars and you say, okay, well, I know if I make $50,000 more this year, it's going to jolt me into a higher tax bracket. So I want to make sure that my conversion is sitting at $49,000 and not a dollar more than that. So there's different ways to make sure that you're staying underneath the cusp, but it's just having that strategic approach. So once again, the negative to a lump sum is you have a higher taxable income, higher tax bracket. And then also, if you're doing that conversion during a retirement year and you're taking out monies from Social Security, that could also give you higher provisional income for that year and affect how much Social Security income that you're going to be netting for that year. So all these different things have, once again, a trickle-down effect. The largest problem that we see is an individual just not having a strategy at all. And once again, just having a portfolio, not actually having a plan. It's obviously important to have a plan to make sure that you're not just leaving everything to chance. And unfortunately, it's not really the individual's fault. What's happening is they go to work. They've been working at the same company for 20, 30, 40 years, and that's all that they know. They're not trying to be financial advisors, not trying to be financial planners. It's unfortunately dates back to the difference between pension plans and defined contribution plans, from going from a pension plan to a more traditional 401k route of basically taking the risk away from the employer and throwing it onto the employee. So this is why individuals have these defined contribution plans, such as a 401k, or they set up their SEP IRA accounts or their 403b accounts, and it makes it harder because now they have to juggle not only their occupation, they have to try to understand how much they should be contributions into it, they have to understand how much they should actually be doing conversions, whether a Roth 401k becomes available at their work, whether they take advantage of that. So there's a couple of moving parts, but just making sure that by breaking each thing down to its specific segments, there's ways on how to make things easy. We obviously try to take away that worry, that confusion throughout retirement. And this is why I like to create these educational pieces so that it gives you guys a nice baseline and feel confident on wherever you are in the retirement cycle. Typically with financial planning, you have an individual that's either in a wealth accumulation phase where they're trying to just grow as much of their bucket as possible, and then it transfers over to something known as wealth preservation distribution, trying to preserve their monies and take a proper distribution strategy or create a proper distribution strategy so that that distribution will be greater than or equal to their expenses, and they have all those leftover monies that they could essentially tilt back towards that accumulation phase, as their ancillary dollars. From here, if you found value in this video, the way and how our process works is we would deal with you either through phone call, through Zoom call, whatever you're most comfortable with, face-to-face based on your area. And we would try to figure out what your situation is and ask you a whole slew of questions to really get detailed off of where you are right now, where do you want to be, how to make sure that you could get from that point A to point B successfully, and then from point B onward, making sure that you're taking away that retirement stress. And the most important thing is to obtain clarity and reduce your retirement stress. We have a plan, a trademark plan. It's a process known as the retirement diet plan, where it helps an individual. Like what I just spoke about during this video is just a sliver. It really off the diet plan, why it's called the diet plan is D stands for distribution planning, I stands for investment planning, E stands for estate planning, and T stands for tax planning. This is just a sliver of the T in tax planning and the diet plan. But obviously, by calling over to us, we'll make sure that we have all four of those quadrants created, or at least have that conversation. And some individuals only like to focus on specific areas, but an ultimate package, an ultimate plan is making sure that you're having these different areas covered. We would like to make sure that you're taking your time with everything, you're never feeling rushed, and we're helping you really understand where you are, where you need to be, and how to do that the best possible way. If you like this video, you feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Retire Sharp, so that you have access to the most updated videos. I'm trying to put out a couple of videos every week to make sure that I can further your comprehension, further your education, and just help you guys make some informed decisions. Thank you very much, and look forward to speaking with you.